Now, it might not be easy to embrace this idea. This is a fellow named Rothschild. I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply. So, you're about to see how World War I and World War II was planned by people who make money from war, and by darker forces who are willing to set up assassinations and destruction in ugly and horrible ways. First, the concept of communism was created so that communism would have to be contained by the quote-unquote good and Christian people. It's an amazing design. They planned and created atheist, evil, fascist, communist powers in order to actually cause the Christianity people to rise up and create wars and to keep ordinary people fighting so that they can keep making money with bullets and construction of war machinery. This is an amazing picture of how Hitler was selected by rich American industrialists and international industrialists to make a wall against communism. The great fearful thing that happened was the secret societies of Jesuit and Mason and the powers of Vatican put an end to the ruling class in Russia, and it got replaced with a powerful populist mob theology that created an atheistic state out of a formerly orthodox and holy state. Watch what happens.
National merchant bankers, the Rothschilds in particular, the First World War had been a gift from heaven. And people watching this should ask themselves a simple question before passing judgment. Supposing you were in business during that war, and the contract you had with the government to supply the troops with tin hats, or boots, or uniforms, or gunpowder was netting you millions every year in profit. And then one day the war ended, and your money stopped completely. What do you think your attitude to war might be? That war was good for business was not the only lesson the ruling classes learned during this period. The Russian Revolution of 1917 terrified rich people all over the world. Watching Lenin and Trotsky taking over such a vast area of the globe, the kings and queens of Europe's tiny sovereign states in particular became extremely nervous. The question on all their minds was, supposing the communist success in Russia should inspire their own working class to rise in revolt. Many of the crowned heads of Europe, like England's George V, had been related to Tsar Nicholas, and the brutal execution of the Tsar and his family, particularly the bayoneting of his young daughters, sent a shockwave through the upper classes of every nation. Did a similar fate lie in store for the royal family?
Now, if you think that the killing of the Romanovs was just a populist move, just a move that was made by the people against the ruling class, you're mistaken. These political power moves are backed by extremely wise and creative people that know how to steer public opinion and put people in power.
Families of Holland, Sweden, Spain, and England. This question was lying heavily on the thoughts of the elite when the First World War ended in 1918, and it had the effect of focusing the minds of the new Illuminati bankers and industrialists on the question of what to do for best with a defeated and dilapidated Germany.
The Illuminati bankers, the super elite, were trying to figure out what to do with Germany and how to use it. And they could get people to align together against the Soviet menace.
The population were poor, penniless, and worn out, yet the German economy still contained some of the most sophisticated and expensive industrial stock on the planet. The Illuminati sensed an opportunity. Supposing, as the world's first international businessmen, they could get their hands on Germany's steel mills, her coal mines, her factories, ports, and her shipbuilding industry. Over the years, certain names have become very familiar to those who maintain an interest in the Kennedy assassination. None more so than Allen Dulles, whom Kennedy fired after the Bay of Pigs disaster, and yet later he somehow managed to chair the Warren Commission, which was supposed to be investigating Kennedy's death. Something few people know, however, is that Dulles and his older brother John Foster Dulles wrote the Treaty of Versailles. They were both lawyers of Sullivan and Cromwell, and it was largely they who decided that the German people must pay war reparations totaling 135 billion marks. A mind-boggling sum at that time, which today translates into 250 trillion. When this was announced, the legendary UK economist J. Maynard Keynes maintained it was a ludicrous sum, and he did a swift calculation from which he reasoned that it would take Germany until 1988, 60 years hard labour, to pay it off. But it didn't. So why?
You're about to see how a couple of guys, a guy who was fired by Kennedy, was able to get onto the Warren Commission, which covered up his assassination. And this guy is also a part of the Versailles Treaty and a part of selecting Hitler to unify Germany and turn it into a war machine to create another grand war.
Why? Maynard Keynes sensed that the Dulles brothers, backed as they were by the new Illuminati, were trying quite deliberately to sabotage the German economy, and they succeeded. As mass unemployment led to hyperinflation, the famous stories of people papering their walls with worthless Reichsmarks and handing over their life savings for a loaf of bread soon followed. With German investors on their knees, the new Illuminati moved in and began buying up shares of stock in German industry at a knockdown price. Now, why did they do this? The cynical mind would say to make a buck, but it really wasn't that simple. What they wanted was to make Germany strong again so that she would become a bulwark against Soviet communism.
Germany was fighting for its life. Certain measures were needed to protect it from its enemies.
Now, if you study eugenics, and if you study in the Fabian Society, the Fabian Society elitists decided that people who were dull, people who were weak of mind, and people who were trash in society should probably be exterminated. The eugenicists believe in cutting back human population without any conscience about individual peoples. Eugenicists believe that it's okay to basically exterminate people for the benefit of other people. Killing some people to benefit other people as a complete justification of killing. So that is the mentality of the totalitarian atheistic state. That is the picture of the society of Stalin and Mao. Mao was just a gangster in China. He was put in place. He was not some kind of special communist theorist. He was just a prideful, pushy expansionist, just like Hitler, that the secret money powers could back and make lots of money under his willingness to exterminate people. Okay, so the whole idea of containing communism, say those words, containing communism, became an important reality in quote unquote Christian societies. Oh, we have to have an army so that we can contain communism, otherwise, it'll take us over, it'll put us in slavery. Containing communism. But it is not as simple as that. It's actually, the problem is containing the greedy money people and the willing
I cannot say
and the
that I am
people that
sorry
are
we applied those.
and the people that are willing to kill other people. That's the true problem. And Yeshua's teaching says, stay away from the high, powerful governments and stay away from the killing of people.
Those measures. We were a bulwark against Bolshevism. We were a pillar of Western culture. A bulwark and a pillar the West may yet wish to retain.
It was around this time that the newspapers, which these same rich people owned, made sure the word Bolshi, a truncation of Bolshevik, ended the English language, so that we would associate Bolshevism with aggression. And it was with these subtle and not so subtle methods that the international elite began to shape our destiny for the remainder.
And Bolshi shifted to commie, communist, communist. And the whole idea of having to contain the bad people, the us and them, the two sides, the Democrat or the Republican, the Tories or the Whigs, this has been a game that the rich people in power have been playing on the masses for a long time in order to get everyone to submit to things that benefit the people who are the money and power people, and even the people who want to kill human beings to put them in submission to one ruler.
Of the 20th century. Intellectuals of the period were furious. They were incensed, they were depressed, and you get a very good feeling of the political atmosphere of the time from the diaries of the Labour politician Harold Nicolson, when he writes, "We have lost our willpower since our willpower is divided. The people of the governing class think only of their own fortunes, which means hatred of the Reds. Our class interests cut across our national interests, and I go to bed in gloom." With such heavy investment coming into the country, particularly from America and Britain, Germany began to recover very rapidly. And then the new class of international financiers began searching around for a homegrown, authoritarian political movement.
Okay, Germany, after World War I, has all kinds of supply flowing in from England and America. Now, the rich Illuminati industrialists who run everything are trying to find a person that can bring Germany into a position of power, especially against the communists or the Bolsheviks, the commies, that have been already set up by the people in power.
They could support. What they needed was someone they could count on to be both aggressive and expansionist. Ultra right-wing causes, which at normal times would have been ignored and marginalized, were suddenly given very careful consideration, until finally the rich elite found a man and an idea which they felt might deliver the political outcome they desired. Adolf Hitler this fledgling National Socialist Party. At the same time that the world's rich elite began grooming Hitler for his starring role, they also became even more deeply involved in military intelligence. I say even more because the Dulles brothers, Averell Harriman, and the chief of Remington, Samuel Bush, a man referred to as the original Merchant of Death, had a relation...
Okay, Remington is the guy that made all the guns. These are all Americans. These are all international business superpowers, and they are setting up the Nazi Party. They are creating and supporting and developing Hitler and the Nazi Party, pouring all kinds of power and money and supply into Germany. 1930s.
Relationship with American military intelligence stretching back into World War I. The lesson here being that the American variant of military intelligence started out with businessmen protecting their investments, just as if they were a mafia. Right from the very beginning, it had nothing to do with national security and everything to do with money. In Hitler, the Illuminati had found a ready-made stooge who could be the face of this autocratic new movement. And when the time came to put together a new secret intelligence service which was going to help protect all the money they had tied up in the German economy, these men also found one was readily available, the Order of the Skull and Bones at Yale University. Discussion of secret societies is something of a minefield because it so easily invites ridicule. It is very difficult for the general public to accept that the super-rich leaders of their Western world can possibly be as mad and deranged as they actually are. The public, generally speaking, are sensible and level-headed people who have to balance their checkbooks, so they inevitably tend to laugh at stories about Satanists and occult believers. But if you talk to any well-informed historians, they are all aware of the important role which various secret societies have played in human history. The Black Hand always played a pivotal role in the history of the mafia. If you talk to anyone in the UK who is political and read books, they are always aware that the ruling class of Britain, including every member of the royal family, is a Freemason. And the emblem of the death's head was sported on the caps of the high-ranking Nazi officers from the very beginning. The symbols of these secret societies always seem to play around with some kind of skull and bones motif, so that it's abundantly clear what their mission statement is. These people are pirates, willing to commit any crime for big money. And they first became established in America at Yale University in 1833 with General William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft. Of course, being a secret society, they made other people curious about them, and in 1867 some undergraduates from a rival campus society broke into their headquarters to see what this skull and bones thing was all about. They reported that inside there were lots of lamps and candles, many dilapidated human skulls lying next to a fool's cap and bells, and it was morbidly dark because the walls were covered in black velvet. Having established a suitably satanic atmosphere, initiation rites were then performed on new members, who had to engage in group masturbation and sodomy while they lay in a coffin. Now, it's very easy to dismiss all of this as bizarre, silly, and irrelevant until you see the list of Skull and Bones members who have ruled America since Skull and Bones began. Although they only graduate 15 initiates a year, those 15 have always gone on to occupy the very highest positions in American society. U.S. Secretary of State William Max Evarts was a...
This is just a glimpse of how dark and ugly the Congress and the presidential atmospheres and even the wars that you feel are so just because they've been marketed well. Why was there no radio transmission around Pearl Harbor on the day of the Pearl Harbor attack? What were the real reasons why Germany rose up in power? Was it just a crazy guy? or was it a big plan? It is clear to me now that it was a big plan. And there are other details. In the German reality, if you spoke against the Nazi rules and regulations of your society and community, you would be taken away for re-education, and you might just disappear and never come home. You would be taken away for re-education, and the concentration camps that were built by American corporations, let me say it again, the concentration camps that were built by American and British funding, you would go into those concentration camps and you would be building guns and bullets and war machinery to keep the Nazis fighting. If you spoke against the government, you would be turned into a slave. If you were a Jew, you would die. The Jews were being exterminated. But if you were a dissenter, you would simply be turned into a slave for the rich corporate people who put the Nazis in place. And you would be building the war machine that kills people if you were not willing to go off to war and fight for the fatherland. These are the realities of the war. World War I was planned. World War II was planned. Communism and atheist fascist governments were planned. They were put in place. This is hard for anyone to realize. But as you go to the early Christian life and lifestyles, you are supposed to disconnect. You can't be a policeman. You cannot defend borders. You cannot fight for a government because you're going to be fighting for rich, greedy people who do not care about human life and who are willing to exterminate humans that are uncomfortable or in the way. And actually killing other humans is a good way of making money in war. So reducing the population is not a problem to people in great political power. Capital punishment, executing a human being, killing a human being, wiping out people that are bad people who are rising up against the good people. This is all ways of making war and killing people. And Yeshua, Jesus, said that you are not allowed to be involved in any of that activity. We have been brainwashed into thinking that we were in a Christian and safe and beneficial country, when in fact all of the government structures have been put in place by great money powers and power-hungry people. This is a very difficult thing to accept or understand, but it becomes simpler when you understand that Jesus is saying you're called to be the most kind and open-hearted mommy and daddy, even with the ability to heal the sick, discern and send away spirits, and speak about eternity, even if they come and kill you. Peace be with you.